Hello there, welcome to my channel. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. A couple of days ago in my live stream I showed a new old pen that I had received on eBay. I won on eBay, and it's this 1945 Parker Vacumatic in Silver Pearl. I was speculating whether it might be green pearl, but I've decided that it's silver. It has some greenish tinges to it. But this pen is ripe for resurrection. When I saw it on eBay, it was perfect. And by perfect, I mean flawed, in that it needs a diaphragm, it's covered in scratches and age and wear, it has some tarnish on it, and especially this nib here looks almost black with tarnish. So this pen's almost 80 years old and it's got 80 years worth of tarnish on it. So one of the miracles and one of the joys of doing a pen resurrection like this is taking a pen with a 14 karat gold nib like that and polishing that gold until it shines up like it's brand new. So we're going to take a look at this pen. It's a standard size Generation 3 Vacumatic. So it has the removing blind cap, and it has this celluloid rod on it, and it has a date code on it right there. I think you can see that right there. That says 5 with a dot after it. So that means it's the third quarter of 1945. It has the deco styled split arrow blue diamond clip, and this is nickel plated hardware, black plastic top finial, nice section with no gouges out of it, and of course that nib that you can hardly see what it says on it. It's so tarnished, and black ebonite feed. And I'm seeing some transparency here as well, even though the barrel is probably caked with ink. You might be able to see this if I turn out my lights. You might be able to see this through here, some of that transparency. See that transparent barrel? That's just beautiful. And as a standard size 1945 with the blue diamond clip, it's very similar to my 1945 Azure Blue Pearl Parker Vacumatic, which I restored, and the nib actually broke when I was restoring it, and I ground it into a stub, a bit of an oblique stub. And this is now my finest vintage restoration pen. I use this almost every day, at least once a week. It's always full of ink, and I even put a modern brass vacuumatic pump in it. So this is a totally resurrected pen, and it is just a beauty. And I'm expecting this Silver Pearl to come up in similar fashion once restored. So what do we have to do to this pen? Well, in no particular order, we have to remove that vacuum pump, and so we'll see how well that comes out. We need to re-diaphragm that vacuumatic pump. We need to remove this section, so a little bit of soaking, a little bit of heat, and once we've removed the section, I can knock that feed and nib out of there, and we can get that nib all polished up. I have done a dip test on this nib, and already it's writing pretty well. I think it's a fine, but we'll see. But it's writing very nicely so far, just dipping it in some ink. So I'm really anxious about getting this nib from black to gold. Here's my 1945 by comparison, Azure Blue, and you can see how beautiful the nib on the right is, and it was almost as tarnished. I don't think I've ever had one as tarnished as this, but it was really old and dingy and so forth. And on eBay, people think, well, you know, that's an old pen. I don't like the dingy look of it, but look, it comes up just like that. Look at that. So I'm expecting this nib to come up looking like that. So I'm excited about that. Let's get this section off of here first and see whether I can get that feed and nib knocked out and polished up. And here we are with only a couple of minutes in the ultrasonic bath of pen flush. That's 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia. And that's all it takes. Isn't that amazing? So there's still some tarnishing on there, of course, but it's night and day. It's gone from black to gold. So now I'm going to see whether I can get this section off, and we'll knock that feed out. First we'll give it a twist, These were not glued in, they were just screwed in, so any of the old ink is what's holding that section tight and doesn't want to come. So I'm going to give it a little bit of heat with my heat gun. Again, this is celluloid and ebonite, and celluloid has a lower melting temperature than ebonite, so you have to be careful not to allow that celluloid to melt. And just a touch of heat, and it's already moving. And there we go. There's our breather tube and the back of the feed. You can see the water got into those threads and allowed all that old ink to get out of there. Old black ink there. So that'll all go in the ultrasonic bath again. So will this. I'm going to get out my inspection camera and go down the barrel and see how much or little of that diaphragm is left. Take a look at that video right now. And what do you know? There is a diaphragm in there after all. It felt like there wasn't. I didn't even test to make sure that this pen would take up ink, but it will. So I'm just going to clean that barrel because that diaphragm is just fine. I'll have to relook at my eBay auction because they said as is. And so this pen that's a relatively new diaphragm in there as well. I can tell from the inspection camera. So I'm going to recheck my eBay listing to see what they said about it. I thought they said as is unrestored. Certainly that nib looked unrestored, so that's going in the bath right now. And here we are with the nib fresh out of the bath, and the nib is section and feed and breather tube. And there's quite a bit of old ink inside that breather tube, and that's why I keep a guitar string around to scrape that out once I get the breather tube out, and we should just be able to pull on it. Yeah, and it comes out easily. And now we can knock that feed out with Bill's block. Thank you, Bill. Get out our small hammer and give it a bash. Doesn't want to move. I need more height. There we go. And there's the feed out, and the nib is still in there. Pull it out gently. Here we go. And so we can inspect this nib to see what the year is. And it says Parker, USA, and an R. Nowhere on this nib does it say 14 karat gold, but that's gold. There's no question in my mind. So I'm going to polish that up with a little bit of metal polish first, and then I'm going to go at it with my jeweler's polishing cloth. And while I'm polishing up the nib, I'm just going to let that feed sit in the pen flush. We'll get cotton swab, and I have the old black ink inside that section. Let that sit in the bath as well. And I've got a hypodermic needle, and this is actually not just a blunt end syringe. This is a sharp end syringe full of water. And this is always a good idea to insert that little hypodermic in that breather tube, and I can flush it out with water that way. Isn't that amazing? Look at that. You'd hardly believe. And was the space of, let's see, I've been doing this for about 15 minutes now. Not bad. So while I'm soaking the other parts, I went ahead and removed the end jewel from the cap, and it was not wanting to go when I was pushing it with some rubber matting material. So I put a couple of drops of my Pensbury Manor Penetrate Potion number 7 and let it sit for a bit, and then put some low-tack blue masking tape on it and gave it a spin, and it came right off. There we go. So put that aside, and now we can go at that brass bushing with a slot screwdriver to get that clip off. So there's the bushing, and the clip comes right off. So now I can soak those things in pen flush as well. Then we'll come back and polish up that nickel plating. It looks pretty shiny so far, and if I lose that blue enamel in the blue diamond, I've got some paint to replace that, which is from Testors. Here it is, and it's Testors number, where are you? Number 1111, and it's called GI Dark Blue. So now I have my eyes on and I'm inspecting this cap and barrel for deep gouges, scratches, things that would need some more aggressive sandpaper to get out, but I'm not seeing any. It's some of the scratches on this are deep enough that I think that I want to give it a light buffing with some 400 grit flexible sandpaper. I'm going to put some masking tape around that cap band. The cap band is not loose. It's not spinning around on there. Sometimes you see that. And I'm going to keep the blind cap on here so that we don't get any separation between the blind cap and the body. I'm seeing a few gouges in here like that. So we'll give it a fine going over with the 400 grit, and then we'll go down through our micro mesh from 1500 through to 12,000, and then finish up with some Meguiar's Mirror Glaze number 9 swirl remover number 2, which is a fine cut rubbing compound polish, and we'll see how well it comes up. For an 80-year-old pen, it looks pretty good. So there we go, light sanding with 400 grit, and I've avoided that imprint so we don't sand it away, and the cap looks pretty good as well. No deep gouges anymore. So we'll go through the micro mesh and then finish up with some polish and then show you the final result. So here we are. I've polished up the barrel and the cap and the section with all the micro mesh and some polishing compound, and it's come up brilliantly, and I can definitely say this is silver now. It had a greenish tinge from some of the grunge on it, I think. So this is definitely silver. And this nickel plated clip was in the pen bath for a few minutes, and we've lost the blue enamel paint, which often happens. So I'm going to go ahead and scrub this up with some metal polish to get it even brighter than that, and then we'll paint that blue diamond back in there again. And there we go, as bright and shiny as new. You can see the brass, the plating didn't go all the way to that part there. There's the original brass, and there's some brass coming up underneath as well. So it's fairly thin, so you have to be very careful when you're polishing with metal polish or any kind of compound that you don't go through that plating. So I think we'll put this pen back together again and do the blue diamond as the last bit. Cleaned up that breather tube. They are amber in color, and there's a small neck side and an open side, and the small neck goes into the back of the feed. I polished up that feed as well with some polishing compound so it's nice and shiny. We get our shiny gold nib out and line it up, get some gripping material on it. Actually, I'm just going to put this back into the section. I'm going to put this section back into the barrel just temporarily, so I've got something to hold on to while I'm pushing it in. And so generally it's been sitting for 80 years with that nib in one orientation inside that section. Going to try to see where that might be by feeling for it. It sort of flips around in there, and it feels like that That might be the location right there. Give it a push and then see where it ends up on the inside here. Yep, that's just about where it was. It was slightly indented from the end of the section. Get my jeweler's cloth and polish my fingerprints off it. There we go. It's right as rain. So we got the nib and the feed and the section back together again. Let's put the cap together again. And we're going to line up the clip so that it's right over one of those breather holes. There are two of them. People ask, what are those breather holes for? Well, when you're uncapping these pens that have bladders in them, you cause suction unless there's some breather outlet for the air to escape. If you had no holes in there, it sucks the ink out of the nib and you have a mess inside the cap. So that's why these older vintage pens had holes in their caps to ventilate the pressure, equalize the pressure. So we're going to put the brass bushing back in. And tighten it down lightly. Double check on our orientation. These are generally with the breather holes at the sides, but I find if they put it with the breather hole there under the clip, it hides one of them. So you only have a breather hole on the back. So let's tighten that down. Just hand tight. And then we're going to put the black plastic jewel back in to the bushing. And it will need a polish as well. I'm going to do that once it's in, because this always leaves residue. Got a little bit of my blue tape just to tighten it down, and that leaves some gunk on there. Get a little bit more polishing compound on and just give it a few circles and it should clean up just fine. And there we go. As nice as new, as bright as new. So we can put the section back in the barrel. So I'm going to add a little bit of silicone oil to those threads right there. And wipe off the excess. And we should be good to go. All I have to do now is fill the pen, check the capacity, and do a test writing sample. Make sure that the nib writes okay. Again, I tested it before. I cleaned it up and it was writing just fine. And then once I know it's writing well, I'll put the finishing touch on and add some of my Testors 1111 GI Blue to that little diamond, and we'll be done with this resurrection. Okay, so before we fill it up, let's check the weight of the pen without the cap. Press tear, get out some Waterman's ink, and we'll dunk it into the section. Push, we hear bubbles. 2, 3, 4. I'm hearing bubbles every single time. There, now I don't hear bubbles anymore. No bubbles. So that should be a maximum fill at that point. Put the blind cap back on. I forgot to do that last time, and discrepancy in the weight really screwed up my measurements. And we have 1.31 milliliters of ink. That's not bad at all. Pretty typical. Almost as much as a modern piston filler. So let's write with this pen, see what happens. And here we are with a 1945 Parker Vacumatic. Oh my goodness, this is a juicy nib. And it is in Silver Pearl. Let's check the wetness. I can already tell it's a gusher. Wow, this is so wet and very smooth with some feedback. This is a typical Parker 1940s Vacumatic type 14 karat gold nib. Should say it's 14K. And I'd say it's probably a fine. It probably measures out to 0.5 millimeters to 0.6 millimeters in thickness, which makes it a Western fine to medium. And what else? Some line variation here. Yep. It's got some bounce to it as well. It's not flex, but some bounce. Wow, that's very nice. So we'll replace that blue diamond, and then I'll come back with some thoughts on this resurrection. Very pleased. Okay, now I'm going to replace that blue enamel paint inside that blue diamond with some Testors 1111. Give it a good shake. This hasn't been open for a while. Oh, here we go. These are always accidents waiting to happen. Oh, the smell of model paint takes me back to my childhood. Yes, I was one of those geeks that painted little cars. Now I'm gonna just put that cap on because I know what will happen if I leave it off. So I've got my eyes on for this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to overpaint that diamond and drop a bead of paint in there. So it fills that entire triangle with a bead of paint, and it will flow over, which is fine. And that dome, as the paint dries, will shrink. And once it's completely dry, I'll polish it out. I'll use an X-Acto blade to scrape off the edges a little bit, and then polish out the extraneous ink, and leaving the blue enamel in the divot inside that triangle. So we just have to set it there for several hours so it doesn't move, and let it dry. So what are my thoughts about this resurrection? This one was a lot of fun, folks. Not only did it not require a diaphragm replacement, but the nib, the cap, the barrel, the nickel-plated hardware all polished up to like new condition. The top finial jewel and bushing came out with minimal fuss, and I was able to polish the clip to a really nice shine. The polishing did remove the blue paint from the blue diamond, but I was able to replace that paint with my trusty Testors Azul Oscuro Brillante, whatever language that is. The nib needed minimal tweaking. I ran it across some 8,000 grit and then 12,000 grit micromesh to polish out some of the nib's feedback, and it's very, very smooth and wet now. Like with many of these gorgeous pens that I resurrect, I kind of fall in love with them and want to keep them, but I'm adamant that my 1945 Parker Vacumatic in Azure Blue Pearl is my single keeper that I won't change, I don't think. I'm hesitant because I've got these three Parker Vacumatics on their way to me right now. I won all three within 5 minutes of each other on 3 successful bids on eBay. I've never successfully won 3 bids in a row so quickly like that before. The top two are late 1930s first generation Parker Vacumatic lockdown fillers in gold and burgundy pearl respectively, and a 1945 Parker Vacumatic in azure blue pearl. That could be this one's twin. They should arrive in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to bringing them back to life.
Lies! Lies, do you hear me? Give my creation! Ah!
I've decided to sell this gorgeous pen for $140 US plus shipping. If you're interested in purchasing it, please drop me an email at inkquiringminds@gmail.com with your name and address so I can get you a shipping quote and let you know how to pay using my PayPal. Just a note to potential buyers, the first to pay my PayPal wins the pen, so please be prompt with your payments. Just expressing interest will not give you first dibs on the purchase. And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section, and you will get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say thank you for watching, and that's all she wrote.
I made this.